Shalom, good afternoon. Today is the 29th of November. It's a Friday. Tomorrow is Shabbat, 30th of November, the last day of November. And of course, Sunday is the 1st of December. And this is our second taping today. Yesterday, or the earlier taping, was the Dvar Torah, or sermon, for the weekly reading of Miketz. Now we're going to do a little bit of news update, and I'm going to share some of the latest pieces of information that my wife Rachel has given me from today's news. Today she worked from 5 in the morning till 11:30, and I think we have some very interesting tidbits. Hopefully every time that I do a news update, we will be able to include tidbits from the Arab language news that my wife picks up. And I think that of course, the two main pointers that we need to look at here in the Middle East is the Geneva Conference on Iran and its nuclear program, where all of this is going to go. I think it's extremely important to note that the Iranians have already come out and denied many of what the American government speakers have said about this agreement in Geneva. And basically the Iranians were saying that the Americans were lying and that these were not things that they agreed upon. So it'll be very interesting to see in the coming days how this all plays out. But one thing that's very important is that many countries, many companies in the world have been wanting to do business with Iran for a long time. And this, shall I say, this snow job on the Iranian nuclear project has now allowed many countries and many companies to jump into the swimming pool and do business with Iran. There was even one story about a port city in the southeastern corner of Iran that is being built by the government of India. India is very interested in receiving its energy supplies from Iran, gas and oil. And in order to do that, there has been this plan over the last few years that India would build a port city or a terminal for the export of gas and oil from Iran to India, and then the Indian ships actually very close from India to Iran to pick up these oil and gas supplies. When the world decided to impose sanctions on Iran, India scaled back the building project of this port city. But as of today, this morning, one of the pieces of information that I received is that indeed the government of India is full blast going back into building this port city, this seaport. And we see also today many other countries, many other companies jumping in to sign business deals with Iran, lift the economic sanctions on Iran. And this is like a domino effect. Everyone wants to get into the act. Everyone wants to do business with Iran. And basically the Iranians haven't given anything in return, really. And it'll be very interesting to see what turns out from the easing of sanctions on Iran. All the business deals are going to pour into Iran while they go ahead building their nuclear bomb, which threatens not only Israel, but it threatens Saudi Arabia, other countries in the Gulf. It threatens the American military bases in Turkey and in Incirlik and other places which are within range of the Iranian missiles. Another interesting point that Rachel picked up today, that it is rumored that President Obama of the United States will be traveling very soon to visit Iran. And you can imagine that if the Iranians are going to go ahead with their nuclear project and Obama is going to go to Iran as a visitor, you can imagine that there must be a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't even know about. And indeed, countries like Israel and Saudi Arabia indeed feel very betrayed by the US government. The US government has basically turned against its allies. And then one of them, of course, was Mubarak of Egypt. And there's a lot of anger today in the Islamic world against President Obama for betraying his allies in the Middle East. Another point that is very important is that Saudi Arabia is a country with a very large Shiite minority. And it is the Sunnis who rule Saudi Arabia. And there is another conference taking place in Manama. Manama is one of the capital cities of the Arab Emirates. And the Arab Emirate governments are now discussing, as a result of everyone else coming close to Iran, the rapprochement with Iran, now these Gulf states are deciding to get closer to Iran, which means that there is tremendous pressure to give more rights to the Shiites in countries that are ruled by Sunnis. And one of the plans of the Shiite Islam is to overthrow the Sunni regime of Saudi Arabia and replace it with a Shiite regime. And so there is great fear today in Saudi Arabia that this agreement of Geneva with Iran will also play into the hands of the Shiites. It will cause the Sunni-led monarchies in the Persian Gulf to become intimidated by Iran, intimidated by the Shiites, and basically to buckle under to their demands. And this will provide a direct threat to the Sunni hegemony over Saudi Arabia. The Saudis are very scared of all of this. They're very, very much not at peace. Another point, before we even speak about Israel, is that the civil war in Syria continues unabated. And there are reports until now, today, I picked up that over 600 Hezbollah soldiers have died in Syria fighting Al-Qaeda and the Free Syrian Army. The Iranians have lost hundreds of their soldiers too. So it's nobody really knows the numbers. But we see a meltdown of Syria. We see Syria self-destructing from within. And of course, nobody can blame Israel for this. Nobody can even blame America or the West for this. This is an internal Islamic problem, the division that only Satan could bring to these Islamic countries. They believe in Satan, and then they're going to get the curse of Satan and the division of Satan, in which Muslims kill Muslims. When it says in Isaiah 17 verse 1 that Damascus will be destroyed in a day, one of God's days is not like one of human beings' days. For us, our day is 24 hours, but God could say a day is 3 years, and we see Damascus being destroyed. We see today missiles. We've been seeing it for weeks now, months now, that the Syrian army is firing Scud missiles into its own population in order to secure more and more areas under the Shiite Alawite hegemony of Iran and Hezbollah, so that they would have a basically secure path to Latakia, which is in the northwestern part of Syria, the coastal areas where the Shiites are very strong. And so I think what we're actually beginning to see is the carving out of parts of Syria to form a Shiite state, and parts of Syria which will be Sunni. And of course, we know parts of Syria will be the new Kurdish autonomous region in the northeast, to the east of the Euphrates River. And of course, in the south of Syria, we see the Druze ethnic group providing their own militias for their own security. And I think it's something that, though I'm not aware exactly of what's going on, or am I qualified to speak about it, but I will say that for sure the Druze in Israel are very interested in what's happening with their brethren on the Syrian side or in Lebanon. And of course the Kurds in the Iraqi northern Kurdistan autonomous area and have a link with their Kurdish brethren on the Syrian side of the border. And of course the Kurds on the Turkish side of the border and the Kurds on the Iranian side of the border. I think we see a new map of the Middle East being drawn, in which you're going to have ethnic groups forming their own borders. And there will be, I believe, a new Kurdistan developing, which again will be on parts of land that until now were parts of Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Turkey. So we will see Syria broken down into mini republics, little republics, in which each area will have their own ethnic group. And unfortunately, like I said before, I mourn for every human being who is killed. I mourn for every Muslim who is killed. But this is something that is brought about by the division of their system, in which Shiites hate Sunnis and Sunnis hate Shiites, and Arabs hate Kurds, and Arabs hate Turks, and Arabs hate Iranians, and all these different groups, they all hate each other. over who is going to have hegemony in the Middle East as the days, weeks, months, and years come. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about Israel. Israel is very, very much engrossed now in a very sad story of one of our greatest singers, Arik Einstein, who died at age 71 from an aneurysm. I think there is no Israeli who has not shed a tear over this singer. This singer was classic Israeli music, and everyone, parents, grandparents, grandchildren, everybody loved Arik Einstein. He was the embodiment of the Jewish and the Israeli spirit, and we are all very saddened that he died this week. And I think it's a testimony to him that in spite of other things that are going on in the country, the media is just completely mourning. The media is bawling for this guy, and so am I, so are all of us. But I think it just shows that Israel, I always used to say, was a flower in the middle of the desert. But today I think it's fair to say that Israel is a flower in the middle of a raging forest fire in which all the countries around us are going up in smoke. All these countries are self-destructing. We see it today, I don't know, because it's developing now as I speak, but these Egyptian military passed a law that there will be absolutely no demonstrations in Egypt. And so we don't even know what's going to happen in Egypt. We know Libya, they're still fighting. We know all these countries, Yemen, they're all still fighting. And it's brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, city against city, which we saw prophesied in Isaiah 19, verses 1 and 2. So stay tuned for the next update, hopefully very soon. And Shabbat Shalom.